Yeah. Oh, hold on. Yeah, that's fine. I'll wing it. So yeah, I'm here to talk about 5 habits to create better products faster. I will get into why I chose that name, because I think habits are an interesting word. But for those of you that don't know me, I like to get this over with, because sometimes people get confused because I get excited about other companies in my slides. So I wanted to make sure you guys know what I'm all about, or what I've been doing. So back in 2005, it's been 10 years this year, I started a company called Crazy Egg. Then in 2008, I started a company called KISSmetrics. And then at Crazy Egg, we actually bought a product called Hello Bar a couple years ago. All of them are SaaS tools. They tend to be either analytics or marketer sort of focused. So Crazy Egg shows you where basically the tagline is like, see where people click. So it's a visual representation. We were very early into like self-service SaaS, so we still don't have a sales team over there, even though it's been going 10 years. KISSmetrics, on the other hand, in 2008, we decided to spin out a new product, and it ended up being a new business. And we raised a bunch of money for that business. And then Hello Bar, we just bought it from somebody and rolled it into sort of Crazy Egg as a second product, because I like products. And creating SaaS products probably for all of you. So I'm assuming a bunch of you have heard of these and probably used some of these before, and I'm sorry for any bad experiences. But I'm here to talk about how I make all those bad experiences happen, I guess. So that's my Twitter handle, and that's the hashtag. I say a lot of dumb shit, so in case you want to tweet it, please feel free. My slides, I just tweeted them. I did a talk probably a month ago, and I tweeted the slides after, and that worked out well, so now I'm trying to tweet them before. But I always try to share them in the slides, so it's kiss.ly/prohabits. You can follow along. You can go do whatever you want with the slides. You can even download them. And this talk is new, never given this talk before, so hopefully there's something in it for all of you. I think there's ample time for questions at the end. I'd rather save them for the end, or I can go off on a tangent, that's why. But I'm happy to answer all these, whatever questions you have, plus, first, find out more about you. So, I'm gonna go through each of these at the bottom, and then there'll be another, I'm sure. So what do you do? One, product, because this is a product meetup, so who's in product? Whatever that means, design, whatever. Cool. How about engineering? All right. Marketing? Cool. Growth? We call it that, I guess. Okay, so marketing, growth, cool. Sales? All right. Hey, back there. And any other? Great. One other. Okay, yeah, I know that role all too well. So thanks for entertaining me there. I always like to know who I'm speaking to. In fact, if I'm in a smaller audience, I'll make all of you introduce yourselves to me, but that won't work. So anyways, I'm going to jump right in. So no matter who you are, this is your job. Your job is to find problems and solve them better than anyone else. Anyone else could be your competitor. Anyone else could be the person sitting next to you if you're in a highly competitive environment. Who knows? But that's the job, and that's kind of how I'd like to frame most of this talk. But first I want to talk about habit, because I came up with the topic with Sophie earlier, and then I didn't have like the catchy headline, so I had to come up with a headline and add some numbers in there, because I'm a marketer at the end of the day, I guess. My first company was a marketing company. It was a consulting company. And so what I like to say about habits, and I tried a lot of words like lessons or tactics or whatever, but I felt like any of those words wouldn't really speak to all of you and speak to something that I haven't really seen anyone speak about. I like to be somewhat original. And so it's an acquired behavior pattern, and it's something that you can learn. And so that's why I wanted to share these 5. And I've tried trying to make sure that it's universal, so I'll do my best to do that. But my theory today is that even if you don't have at least, let's say you don't have any of these habits, and you picked up one of them, you'll just be better at thinking about products, creating products, and building them faster. So these are the 5. I'm going to go through them anyways, so I'm not going to repeat them, but these are the 5 product habits that I came up with. I got this nice little arrow going here, and I'm really proud of myself. It took me a while to figure that out. Anyway, so the first one, always start with customers. That's probably my favorite one, and also kind of obvious, because it's like if you're not building for the customer, you're probably not building anything at all. This is also one of my favorite cartoons. I used to have a title here, and I called it when you're solving your own problem, because a lot of people will sit there and go ahead and try to solve their own problem. and I added some labels. So the way I think about it is if you're trying to solve your own problem, you're going to hit yourself against a wall like that guy right there. And those two ladies over there are probably going to be looking at you, who are probably your customers, like, I don't care about that. I'm just going to keep watching the person, go through that pain. So I find this scenario a lot, and how I feel about it is you are not your customer. And I know there's folks out there that you'd probably consider pretty good at product that would tell you, hey, you should build for yourself, build for yourself, build for yourself. I get it. Maybe if you have a pain, you notice other people have it, you can start by building for yourself, but at the end of the day, you are not your customer. They're going to outnumber you. So one tactic, one habit to help you talk to customers is Cindy Alvarez. She was a product manager at KISSmetrics a long time ago, and other companies. She since went to Yammer and now is at Microsoft, and she wrote this whole book on customer development. I'd say I learned a lot from her about how to do customer development right. And in short, customer development, for those of you that don't know, is just a methodology on how to talk to customers in the right way before and after you've got a product. And then I'm going to tell a quick story. So back in the day, this was a date on here. This is dig.com. It doesn't look like this anymore, but this is old school dig with the voting and all that stuff. And this was probably around July of 2006. And we actually launched our product Crazy Egg on Dig. And at that time, we got a whole bunch of uploads. We were on the homepage for a while. Not that many people buried us, so we still stayed up there for a while. Started commenting with people and stuff like that eventually. But there was a lot of inbound coming to us. At that time, Crazy Egg was actually a free product. And I became a line item on some people's comparison of us and a newer competitor about a month later. And they said, Hiten, very responsive and helpful. And they had all these other negatives and positives, but and this was on the 37 Signals blog post that they did very soon after we released our product. And I was in there commenting as well. But I think one of the easiest ways is to be human and help people. That's one of the easiest ways to, always start with a customer when you're building product. I think I would say that the closer you are to the customer, the better information you have about their needs, their wants, and their problems. With your product, and that's probably the easiest hack, easiest habit. Sometimes it's hard to do because customers can be harsh. Blog posts can be harsh. But back in the day, I used to do all of customer support for Crazy Egg. We had basically tens of thousands of users pretty fast because we had a free product, and we also had a bunch of pre-launch signups, and this was back in 05, 06. And all of our, even to this day, all of our support at Crazy Egg is done through Gmail with labels and stuff like that. So you don't need to use a tool. Don't tell Zendesk that. So engage with your customers. That's the to-do. I've got a bunch of these to-dos kind of mixed in there. This one's very obvious. I'm starting out really light. I'll get better over time. So here's another thing that I love talking about, and I'm really excited to share. Do any of you know about Amazon's working backwards process? Raise hands. Anybody? Okay, a few of you. Cool. It is this really awesome process that when I understood it and actually talked to some product managers at Amazon, I realized I learned that they actually do this for almost everything. They'll even do it for recruiting. And even today, just today, I had a discussion with a friend of mine about Amazon Web Services and how they probably had a working backwards approach where they look 10 years out and then work backwards from there instead of forwards to there. It was very interesting. In short, Ian McAllister, product manager at Amazon, wrote a little, I have links at the bottom in my deck so you can go find out more. But he wrote all about this process and how they do it. They make it a press release, and they have a bunch of these components to the press release. But the cool thing about working backwards is they do this before they write a single line of code. So that's sort of what I would recommend all of you do. One of the things I've learned about this, though, is I think we're in a world today of blog posts, so I'd probably change the press release to be a blog post because that's the more popular form of content and the way that companies share their ideas. But really, it's something I wrote at the bottom, which is it'll force you to start with customers and find their problems. And the reason is if you have to write this document, and that's what you're writing first, before a spec, before a line of code, before any designs, or before you present it to anybody, you're really forced to find out, are we solving the right problem? What do customers really think about this space, or what have you? And you'd probably go do customer development and things like that. So I found this to be a very helpful thing in our product development processes. I'd encourage all of you, if you haven't done it, just experiment doing it and see what you think, but it's been really helpful to us. Next, jobs to be done. Are any of you familiar with the jobs to be done methodology? Cool. Very few. Awesome. So, it's another one that's exciting. I'm going to read one of these. Actually, I'm going to read 3 of these, right here. Age-old jobs, new solutions, and you'll probably get an idea of what it really is. But the theory on a high level is that people are hiring your product, no matter what kind of product it is, to do a job. And a job is like literally a job. They're trying to do work, for lack of a better word. But one way to think about it is people, particularly students and young people, wanted to pass notes and messages without fear of other people seeing them. That's an age-old thing. Happens all the time. I'm sure some of you experienced it in school. People still want this, so today they use Snapchat. That's the job, and that's the product that fulfills that need. Another one would be people wanted to store photos in a safe place, like the shoebox under the spare bed. I'd ask you guys to guess, but it's actually Dropbox. So people still want to do this today, so they use Dropbox. A lot of Dropbox's information is basically the data they store is actually photos. And last one that I'll share is, and there's 2 more in here, but people wanted to put their favorite photos in a prominent place, like their mantelpiece, so everyone could see them. People still want to do this today, so they use Facebook. And so the whole idea of this jobs to be done methodology is that all of us that are creating these solutions, there's a job that people, users, customers, whatever you have in your business want to do, and you're just fulfilling that need. And it's really about focusing on the outcome for the customer, not the tactics of your features or anything like that. And this is from actually Intercom's book on product management. They released a few weeks ago. And so I'm going to go through a couple screens from their site. And the reason I'm going to do that is they didn't just write the book. They actually follow a lot of these things and really believe in the jobs to be done methodology. So on their site, if you go to the homepage, there's a whole bunch of other stuff, but you go to the packages, they actually call it packages. They don't call it plans. They don't call it pricing. They don't call it anything like that. They have these packages, and there's 4 of them, and they're even labeled with very jobs to be done-y, and then they have a sort of sentence below them. So I'm going to read them because I find them really fascinating. So observe, learn, engage, and support. So for observe, they say, see who your customers are and what they do in your product. They didn't list out a feature. They barely listed out a benefit. This is actually a job that you are hiring that package to do for you as a customer of theirs. Learn. Get product feedback from the right customers at the right time. You know exactly what that's about. Engage. Guide new signups to become fully engaged, active customers. Probably know what that's about. And then support. Streamline support for your team and your customers. And I'm going to show you the home pages. So this is for Observe. And it says, do you know who's using your product? And there's all these people kind of randomly messed up, not messed up, but like that, and anonymous. And then when you actually start clicking down, you start seeing real people. So that's kind of cool. Looking for quality customer feedback, that's on the learn side. So they have an image reflecting that, but this is kind of the job, right? And they're trying to represent it. This one's interesting. They don't use a question. In the other 3, they actually do. And I can probably guess why, but users are signing up, engage them before they walk away. Guide users of your app to become active customers with Intercom's automated email and in-app messages triggered by time or behavior. So the theory I have here, just to give you guys a theory, I don't know, I haven't talked to them about this, but is that this is the job that is an emerging job. It's something new that we do in product and marketing, of like doing drip emails and things like that to re-engage customers and help them learn about the product. So I think a lot, what's that? They've got a lot of explaining to do, basically, is kind of the deal with this category. So I even find it interesting that they had to go here with this one while all the other ones are questions. And this one's age old. This is probably the oldest job they actually do, in my opinion, which is customer support. But if you look at the wording here, they straight up say, is your customer support process broken? And that's probably because in their own interviews, they learned that most people think their customer support processes are broken despite what tool they use today. And you see all this confusion and stuff. It's really neat. Anyways, I wanted to show examples from them because I think they do it really well. And I think that they're really living what they say. So in short, find out what jobs people hire your product for. The site is jobstobedone.org, or you can go find Intercom's product management book and you can learn more about jobs to be done, because it sounds like many of you could probably utilize that, and that'll help you always start with the customer and focus on them. So, next up, continuously improve. So I saw this cartoon and I liked it. So basically the guy is saying, for those of you who can't read this, now tell me about your big idea. And he's got this big idea and he's unveiling it, And my whole thought on how you continuously improve is to not do that, because it's likely he has never shown anybody this product before, and he's about to unveil it for the first time, and it's probably not going to turn out well for him. So start small, iterate fast. There's this famous little cartoon about minimum viable products. I think it was inspired by Spotify because they've had some talks about how they do product development. And so here, let's assume you're building a product and the job is get people from point A to point B. And if that's the goal, the way, a lot of people the way we used to do product development was we'd build the wheel, then we'd build the other wheel and put an axle on it, and then we'd build a body of the car, then we'd put a steering wheel and a windshield, and eventually we'd probably even put a cover so it's not a convertible. But the cool thing, I think, about the new way to do it, or the way that's kind of more modern, is you actually, or MVP, a real definition of an MVP, isn't just the wheel, because you can't really get from point A to point B on a wheel. Maybe you can if you put the little, pedals on it, but then you'd have to learn how to do that. Most of us don't know how to do that. So you actually start with a skateboard. Then you start with a skateboard with a handle, then you move it to a bike, and then a motorcycle, and then a car. And I think the coolest thing about that is that at every step here, you're actually able to help people do that job that they're hiring your product to do, instead of starting with the wheel and having to wait to step 4 to make people happy. And the other thing I really like about this analogy, I showed a few of my friends, and the analogy we used was like, well, you don't know if you're going to end up with a convertible or not, but you have some rough idea. So it's likely that by the time you get through this, you thought it was a convertible, but it ends up, it needs to be a hatchback because people have more stuff they need to carry and don't want their hair all over the place or whatever. Or they live in a cold place, who knows. Another one, this is from Intercom. They say start with a cupcake. It's a very similar ideology. It's like instead of having a cake base of filling and icing, you actually just build this little small cupcake because it takes less ingredients, less time. And my theory is you can make more of them, but that's a whole different tangent. And then you make the cake, then you make the wedding cake. And I think this even goes to the idea that, when you're starting out cooking, just like you would create a product, it's much easier to build a cake, something really small, something that still solves a problem that's, kind of, in this case, that sweet craving. And then you would make the cake, because the cake's much harder. If it fails, that's a bigger flop. And then the wedding cake is obviously what most of us that bake will never get to. So basically, it's create a minimal product that satisfies the job. If you know what the job is, that's what's going to allow you to do that. So another one, which is super boring, and many of you in startups probably are going to hate me for saying this, but you have to write it down. And I think that's the only way you can actually improve anything. I used to personally hate it, especially when we were a much smaller company many years ago in all my companies. And I could just walk over to somebody, or I could just pick up the phone, or I could just send them a message now on Slack, back in the day on Campfire. And so I think the only way to actually make things repeatable, scale, and continuously improve is actually creating what I would call a playbook. And I've got lots of examples and some freebies, so I'm going to get right to it. So the tip here is just write the process down so it's easier next time. That's what I always think about. So if I do something in my company and I shouldn't be doing it, which is a whole different story, and someone else has to do it after me, I should write it down so that at least they know what to do, even if it's just like 5 steps. And the reason I do that is because a lot of times these processes that you think are never going to have to happen again, or ones that you're always going to be doing yourself, they need to be repeated and done by somebody else. And it's not very hard to write these down, even on the highest level when you start. So I've got thousands of notes now, but anyways, I think that's a really important point. So I'm going to go through some case study stuff. So back in 2012, this was when lean startup was something more of a big deal. I think it wasn't as normal today, or emerged into how we do things, or hated, depending on who you are and what you think. And so we tried the process. You'll notice the build, measure, learn loop at the bottom. And then we created this whole process. And again, back to writing it down, this wasn't like we made it up. We actually looked at a lot of patterns in our own product development and then decided we wanted to make it up. This is a highly collaborative process. The reason is we even had things like vote where to focus, review opportunities, split into teams. I mean, we had this whole thing going on. We used to call them golden motions, because one of the key tenets of it was you just focused on one metric, one thing, but I'm going to talk a little bit about that later. From there, we needed to explain a little bit more about this thing we called a thesis, that we learned from a bunch of product managers, which was basically how do you explain what you need to build? And this was, the thesis was like a preemptive thing to a working backwards sort of document for us, at least back then in 2012. And so, there's basically all the ideas. They come from a lot of different places. They get discussed. Then we look at analytics and data, and then now we have top 5 to 7 ideas, and then through customer development, we get to our top 2 or 3 ideas, and then we make a thesis. For us, a thesis was problems, use cases, and examples. We experiment a lot with process just because we always wanted to get better, and as the team scaled, we had to keep doing that. So we actually at KISSmetrics back then were a fully distributed team, so there was no office. Now there is. But we actually went so far as somebody took a picture from Twin Peaks, which actually I was just there today, and then this was Golden Motion 4. We did about 5 of them before we stopped the process. And the team actually made up this whole thing. So I think people get really involved, they get excited. So there's a way that you don't just document a process, but you involve everybody in it. We also had things like after every, what we called Golden Motions, after every single one, we'd have a survey, and we'd actually try to figure out how everyone felt about it so we could make it better. And by the 5th one, you could see people were all excited about it because we made this little poster thingy. Then after that, this was actually right around 4. After 4, one of our product managers at the time, our single product manager, he came up with this whole flow about how we should do it because we were really into problem team, solution team, which is a kind of lean startup sort of thing that most of you probably don't know about. But basically, problem team is the team that's mostly product managers, sometimes designers, but they're basically trying to find the problem. They're trying to figure out what's the right problem to solve for customers. And the solution team is mostly designers, engineers, and things like that. And it tends to be there's a bunch of handoffs and things that we did. So we actually made it prettier. That was his little chicken scratch. And so we made it prettier and came up with this whole, we do research, customer development, and metrics. We get that thesis I showed earlier. So it's like a minified version of that. Then we do a handoff of all this stuff to the solution team for them to sort of review this thesis. Then we do a little Q&A together. Then we go back down and plan the solution. Then we go back up, defend the solution apparently, and then we iterate that if necessary and go back. And then we go actually build it, ship it, and then kind of take care of leftovers. And obviously we come back to this when that feature doesn't work or something. Anyways, when we want to improve it. So that was the old process. We came up with another process, and I actually laid out the whole process in this Google Doc. You guys can find it on the slide share. But it's basically idea, hypothesis, plan and prioritize specs, design and build, release and analyze. And this was also back in about 2012, 2013, when we came up with this process. What you will read there is details of each area. It was created by somebody who joined that actually came from Intuit, so it's got slightly more corporate speak than you might be comfortable with, or at least I am, but it's good, and that's why I shared it, and I'm going to embarrass him later anyways. So this is another thing he created. This is a project status template, so this is actually what we use now to sort of organize our stuff, so you guys can find this for free on a Google spreadsheet and copy it, do whatever you want. The cool thing about it, and I'm going to go through it because I think it's really cool and it really excites me, but it's basically you have a project name, whatever you want to name your projects, categories, whatever, super easy because it's a spreadsheet. Then you have this cool thing called the status, and it's basically a drop-down. And the statuses we had were started, complete, blocker, will not deliver, and planned. And basically, when you pick a drop-down, the colors change on here. And I'll explain what's interesting about the colors and drop-down in a sec. And obviously here is the owner. So here, if you notice, there's a blocker, and it's actually supposed to be, I guess, in orange. And here's a will not deliver. But when we were like on 19th January of 2015, right here on this item, I guess it's UI, it actually said planned. And it was 3 blocks and it was planned, but we knew that we were at that date. And so, normally when you see charts like this, a lot of times the colors change. We don't want to change the color because we want to know the current status. So let's say that one was will not deliver, but we started it 3 weeks ago. We started it 3 weeks ago. It's a will not deliver. We kind of get the full idea of like how long we took. And so if you had this for like a whole bunch of quarters, weeks, whatever, you'd actually understand how many projects you're starting that you never finish and all these other kinds of things. Cause you're just able to have one color on each item, each row at a time. But this has been a really helpful tool, for us, and I've shared it with a bunch of other people, so I thought I'd share it here. And you can guess we really don't use any project management tools except this. And the other thing I would say about this is the product manager owns it. So nobody else can collaborate on it. They can view it, they can comment on it, but they can't collaborate. You have a question back there, you must be having a good one, so what do you got? Yeah, that's a good question, and I guess I baited you on that. I've used every tool out there, and there's a reason there's so many tools out there. Because us product managers, I'll put myself in that category for the moment, think there's always a better way to do it. Because otherwise we wouldn't be product managers. So that's why I think there's so many tools. And I think this is the ultimate tool if you ask me. But it's because it's flexible. You can make it your own. Trust me, look at it, you'll see it. But the thing we got over was this is not a collaborative tool. This is something where the product manager owns it. You want more detailed tools and road mapping, you can go into Trello, Asana, whatever you use. But you want to know high level and make sure everyone in the company can understand what's going on in product. This is the tool that's most effective. Even like I'll be in meetings, and I used to be on the other end of this. Sometimes I'm on the other end, but like, let's say I'm the person like reviewing something like the CEO, right? He's talking to a product manager or whatever. And the product manager she'll like show me this, and then I'll be like, okay, well, I got this crazy idea and I want to do this crazy thing. So then the product manager, she can just look at this and go, oh, okay, you want to do that. That's cool. This person is currently working on that. They're the right person to do it. Would you like me to like turn that into a will not deliver and add a new item for what you want to do? You know, like that's the reason this is very effective. And I haven't seen product management tools be that effective and that quick at getting it done. So, you know, I tend to use things like this a lot. All right. Think deeply. So that's habit number 3. So I tweeted this, and apparently some people liked it. But I had this saying from years ago that I called "click, click, awesome." And so in my mind, making things easier for other people, like the customers you have, the people, the users, whatever it is, in your business. In our case, sometimes we'll even say make it easier for our team. That's why we'll optimize our processes. Tends to be about the only way to think about doing product development today, as far as I see it. Because if you're not making it easier, you're making it harder. And depending on the category you're in and how mature your market is, it's likely that there are a lot of ways to make it easier. If you're in a new market or like something where people really haven't added tech to it, then I think there's a lot of opportunity to make it easier. I think you have to get more creative over time if it's like, let's say analytics, web analytics or whatever, because there's so many tools out there or whatever. So you got to think harder about this. But the ultimate truth for me about thinking deeply is, how do I think deeply to make things easier for other people? That's like my motto, I guess. So one easy way to do that would be just figure out how to reduce the number of steps. And one thing I've noticed is that the companies that are able to think about it from a customer standpoint and then think about how to reduce the number of steps, they're the ones that tend to build the most successful sort of products out there. And I'll go through a case study right now. So this is something I'm thinking deeply about. But this is the evolution of A/B testing, and this is what I would call the origin story of how it came about. Originally, A/B testing was all about marketers, so that was the initial target. And I like origin stories like Superman and all that stuff. It's really awesome. So that's why I called it that. But it is an origin story. So old school A/B testing. This is a big long quote from my friend Sean Ellis, who was the VP of marketing at LogMeIn from 2003 to 2007. I would say that was when we didn't have any tools for A/B testing that anybody could use, maybe just high-end enterprise customers. And I'll read it to you because I'm sure it's very interesting. So one way I have worked around my engineering deficiencies has been to hire the skills onto the marketing team. For example, in my last long-term VP marketing role, I hired a front-end designer / engineer to design and code landing pages and a dedicated DBA to build reports and run ad hoc queries. So this was basically the origin story, in my mind, of the kind of typical things you heard, once the web started happening and it started getting more competitive and you had competitors and you had to figure out how to grow, et cetera. And Sean Ellis is actually also, he coined growth hacker. So if you read that, you can probably think about why he coined the term, because he saw this trend that like, you need more engineering chops, you need more help to be able to do stuff in marketing, because marketing is harder than ever with so many more options. And that was back in 2003 to 2007. And back then, I didn't hear this story from many marketers. This was like a very rare thing. And LogMeIn's now a public company. They started out freemium, et cetera. And so they've been successful, and he was very successful there. After that, we had Google Website Optimizer. It went in beta in 2006. But it was still very painful, in my mind. I remember, any of you remember using this thing? Yeah, cool. Okay, some of you. So you actually had to go take your page, think about all the sections you wanted to sort of A/B test, and put these script tags everywhere. And then maybe Website Optimizer will be able to read the page and figure out what you're trying to do, and then you can start manipulating it. So you had to basically name your sections and add new code to the page. And so that meant a marketer, a designer, or a product manager, whoever was doing A/B testing had to go to an engineer and be like, hey, can you like tag these things on this page for me? And that was kind of state of the art. And so I call that first generation A/B testing. This is right after this sort of Sean Ellis era, I'll call it. So it required engineering, so it took days to get experiments started. Marketers were unable to run experiments, kind of enough of them, and also on their own. And then people who figured out how to experiment faster, like Sean Ellis, ended up getting the growth. I'll wait a second while you guys read this. It cracks me up every time. So this is what engineers thought about marketing back in the day, and this was in 2010, so not that long ago. And that's actually when Optimizely came out. All of you use Optimizely, I assume, played with it, know the concept, cool. So Optimizely, down the street, across the street actually. And this is their WYSIWYG editor. This is actually one of their examples of all the stuff you can do, but at the end of the day, you can pull up any site and manipulate it in a WYSIWYG. So that was game changing for kind of A/B testing, and I think they invented that category, and now a lot of the tools you see out there that do A/B testing do it like they started. Single line of JavaScript, you install it once, and experiments start in seconds. Marketers can now run many types of experiments on their own, and I think fast growth, one of the reasons fast growth is becoming common in marketing, at least landing pages testing and all this kind of stuff, is because of tools like this, specifically Optimizely. And then I did some research, and I realized that, wow, it worked. So somebody thought really deeply about this problem and decided to solve some of the hard technical problems of creating a WYSIWYG. And once they solved them, obviously it became easier for all of us to solve them because we could look at what they did and do it better, right? Or at least our engineers think like that. But either way, they own 77% of the testing market based on one analysis that I found and did. And then the next thing that's similar to them only owns about 8%, and Google owns about 8%. After that, it doesn't even matter. So the reason I mentioned this case study is I'm personally thinking deeply about what's next for A/B testing, and so I had this ready, and I like origin stories, and this was a good one. So take the time to do thorough research up front. I kind of want to mention this for a second in that I've recently, probably in the last couple of years, started meeting some folks from Apple and Amazon, as I mentioned earlier, even Facebook, and the amount of, and this is specifically product managers and people building stuff, but the amount of depth that some of these companies go into about a problem before they do anything is ridiculous. And I don't mean like simple stuff like competitive research or any of that. It's like literally thinking about the jobs to be done, thinking about the workflow, thinking about, all the different ways they can make things easier for customers or users. It's uncanny at like, you do hear the stories about Apple having all these prototypes and stuff like that and then throwing them away. I'd say that they have more prototypes in there than we can ever imagine that we'll never see. And it's because of their depth on trying to solve some of these problems. And not just saying that we have a technology and we're going to make it, because we're just going to put it out there. Google Glass. Anyways, Google Glass. Oh yeah. So I had to put a plug for Product Hunt. I'm assuming all of you know about it, but if you don't, producthunt.com. The reason I put this plug here is I think they have made the thorough researching of any space much easier. And it's only going to get easier over time as long as they're around. Hopefully they are. But like, I love this product, and I probably go there daily and just look at things in my market and new things that are coming up. It'll help you really get depth of research really fast. I remember what I used to have to do before. I used to have somebody who spent half their time just finding related products to things I'm thinking about. And so this has replaced that. All right, so second to last, use data. So I have a bunch of analytics companies, so I better talk about data, right? I'll wait while you guys read this. I like Dilbert. So I don't mean that kind of data, but it's kind of funny. This was from 2007. So this is Steve Cox. He built a lot of those spreadsheets and stuff. I just and the processes and helped lead them at KISSmetrics earlier. This is kind of our lesson learned from building products without having deliberate metrics many years ago. So all product initiatives need a single metric and a target goal, or don't do it. I can even come up with single metrics and target goals for new products if you want me to. So if anyone's wondering how to do that, happy to talk about it at some point. But this is really important and something that when we started doing it, our roadmap got demolished and changed a lot until we really figured out how to pick a metric, make it our own metric. Not like, I don't mean DAU, MAU type metric. I mean really specific metrics. And then this is where you hear like Facebook learning that you do, in the first week, if you get 15 friends, you tend to be a more active user and stuff like that. Those are the kind of metrics that are the kind of advanced level. I think beginner level would be happy to, get your active user base up. That's fine. And intermediate's like when you start not having the data science to do that analysis, but getting better at like, let's have people create 3 reports in our analytics product, and see what that looks like and try to improve that metric. So, this is super important. I'll give some more examples. I do want to stress this. I like stressing this when I talk about data. So data doesn't help you make decisions. It helps you make decisions. It doesn't make them for you, but it really just informs your decision making. If you have more questions on that, I can talk about it, but there's a lot of great talks about being data informed versus being data driven. And so the simple way I say it is if you're data driven, you're just looking at numbers and trying to move them up, hopefully, or down if that's appropriate. But if you're data informed, you're actually applying the kind of working backwards methodology, the long-term vision for your product, founder input, whatever it is that you have as your sort of input, and trying to make sure that the data actually informs where you need to go or where you want to go, not just doing it for doing its sake. One thing I love doing is creating a hypothesis. This is actually from Optimizely. It's like a test hypothesis they do. Hypothesis is just a guess. It's a fancy way to say a guess for those of you that don't like the word hypothesis. And so it's just make a guess. Like I like starting with the guess, and then I use information, data, what have you, to prove me right or wrong. That can inform a lot of product development as well. This is again from Intercom. They talk about really cool ways to test feature usage and describe a lot of interesting things about that. So, many of you probably are working on products with lots of features. They talk about a really easy way to talk about usage. It's basically 0 to 100 would be 0 to 100% of your user base using this feature. And then you basically just get the data for all the different features you have, in your product, and then analyze kind of where you get the most usage. And then obviously you can even look at this over time and see if there's any changes in usage. But their whole theory, they have a lot of theories on this, so I'll let you read their book, and it's pretty good. It's really good. It's the best book on product management out there today, which, yeah. So seek out data before you take any action. So I tend to have a lot of people come to me that have data, but then they don't talk about data. They just tell me like, oh, what should we build next and things like that. And I tend to make those meetings very short if they don't have data, and whether it's in my own companies or somewhere else. And I just tell them, well, like, here are the 5 questions I would ask, to figure out what you should do next. And usually it tends to be things like, what's your feature usage? Or, what's the metric that you're actually trying to improve? And if you don't know, then let's figure out how you should be tracking that, understanding it. And so I think I try to seek data, and data isn't just quantitative data, it's also qualitative data. Like, we know that customers are unhappy with the funnel reports because they can't drag and drop the steps. That's actually one from KISSmetrics we haven't solved yet. But, those are all those data points I think are important. And I don't just mean quantitative, it's also qualitative data. Okay, last but not least is focus. I think that this is our problem as humans. But so cool. This is, I showed 2 pizzas because Jeff Bezos and a bunch of folks have this 2 pizza team rule. They don't really create teams that are larger than 2 pizzas. And my friend David Cancel came up with a story on this. He started 5 different companies, and worked at 5 different companies actually. And he said small teams mean fewer distractions, less risk of getting mired in pet rocks. I was trying to find a pet rock picture, but I couldn't. The pizza seemed better. And a singular shared focus on the customer problem at hand. So this kind of sums up a lot of what I've talked about from the beginning and kind of the end, being customer driven, starting with the customer and focusing. But I thought that quote really summed up kind of how I think about product management. And he's someone who I think has built great products. This is a guy, Brian. He talks a lot about growth, and he has this whole framework of what focus does to your team. And he has this blog called Co-Elevate. And so I think his framework is great, and it kind of would help you understand why you should focus. I think product managers actually have a hard time focusing, so this is why I say the best for last. Another friend of mine, I call him founder and troublemaker. His name's Arjun. And I happened to be at a talk he had, because we share a VC firm, our early stage firm, in our businesses. He's now at Yahoo heading up mobile growth. But he said a company can only do one thing at a time. I actually tweeted it because I heard him say it. And then all these people piled on and said, well, you can do 2 or 3 or blah, blah, blah. And either way, this is controversial. He tends to be the troublemaker. And he is a Yahoo who's clearly doing more than one thing at a time. But we won't get into that. But when he was running his companies, he was definitely focused on doing one thing at a time. And I think it really does resonate with me that you try to do too many things, you end up failing at all of them. Or sucking at all of them. And so this is kind of the second to last thing. The to-do here is, are you working on the right thing right now? Don't answer it right now because you're probably not, and it would be a long discussion probably. I know I'm not. But this is something I constantly ask myself. And if I can't answer it or don't have a good answer, I actually reassess everything, which doesn't happen that often these days, or at least as often as I'll admit to all of you. But yeah, this is the question for focus for a product manager for me. And then the last one is just this simple business growth equation, which is focus plus sequence equals speed. And I know this talk was about getting the right product faster. So I wanted to give you guys sort of an equation that I tend to think about in my own businesses. So basically focus, obviously, the one thing or what you choose to do, the category of thing. Sequence would be the order in which you do those things, and that really determines how fast you move. And in the case of product, it's like move on an opportunity, because I think us product managers, when we think about this stuff, we're trying to move on an opportunity, and delivering it in customers' hands in the right way is really important. And so what order do we build our features in? What order? I mean, we actually do a lot of engineering prototypes, so we'll prototype things to learn kind of like constraints that we have and things like that. So that's like, what order of those things do you need to do with the right focus? So this is, something I think about a lot, and so I thought I'd share it. And yeah, I have my email, my Twitter handle. I'm pretty easy to find, and I'm always happy to help. And I think I can help you right now by maybe answering somebody's questions, or a bunch of questions. Yeah. Yeah, because that was the origin story.
So what do we do?
I don't know yet. I think that, please, yeah. 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 With advertising, with landing pages. Yeah. 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 Nice. Yeah. Is it working out? Is it leading to better products? Awesome. Great. So there's another to do. Yeah. Yeah. To what? Pricing? Oh. I could do a talk that's 10 times as long as this. So the folks at Price Intelligently, that's a blog, or it's a site and their consulting service doing pricing consulting. They've blogged a lot about pricing. I would defer to them on pricing. There's a book called The Strategies and Tactics of Pricing. It's like a textbook from high school, like style. They teach it at MBA school. Those are my favorite. That's my favorite content. In general, with pricing, I think people tend not to test it. So that's a big thing that I've seen. Like they're scared to test it. But I think there's easy things like, no matter what, post checkout, surprise them with the lowest price, right? And don't charge them the high price. I don't think anyone will be pissed off because you charged them a lower price than they were expecting. But you could still get a whole checkout flow tested. So that's one way. Another thing about pricing would be people don't change it enough. Which also means they probably don't test it enough. But like how I go about pricing with Crazy Egg back in the day, I licked my finger, put it up in there, and said that's the pricing because we wanted a self-serviceable product. So we're kind of stuck with a $9, $19, and so on plan. And we've done a lot of stuff since then, but we haven't changed it often enough there. So I would say that those two things are probably the key mistakes I see people making. And the last thing I'll say is. Everyone says you need value-based pricing and having tiers and like these meters. When I think about most pricing pages, and I haven't done this study yet, but I'm interested in doing it on other people's sites, but I think pricing pages are confusing. And so I'd be doing a lot of user research on your pricing pages to understand a bunch of stuff. But one of the most important things is, do they actually understand the pricing and what we're charging them for and how we're going to charge them? I think a related thing that I use is, people forget that these people are already buying other products to do the same job you're trying to do for them, as well as do other jobs. And so you have to think about, how do they buy? Like, what do they pay for? Or like, what are the meters that they use outside of your own product? For example, with an analytics product, historically you get charged on your monthly page views, right? So trying to deviate too much from that kind of breaks the mental model that a buyer has when they're trying to buy your product. So I see a lot of people make that mistake and they invent stuff. Like, if you have a product that does nudges, whatever they're called, let's just say, you would charge people on the number of nudges. But if nobody knows what a nudge is, and you got to educate them on what a nudge is, then like, you already lost the battle right when they see the page. So those are, I guess, some random tips in 3 minutes. Yeah.
So with the product, my company gathers 1 and 2 your ID.
What do you mean by baggage? What kind of baggage? Like code
A
or?
bunch of features that didn't
Yeah.
specifically.
Yeah.
Literally cost.
Yeah. I would say if a feature sees the light of day and someone's paying for it, then you already went to, and then you think it's not important and you killed it. Your product development process needs some improvement and iteration so that you can catch that issue before it gets to that point. So instead of starting over with your product, I think now you have to make the hard decision of what do you cut and how do you make customers okay with it. And there's a lot of ways to do that. Grandfathering them in and all kinds of stuff. So I would recommend you do that. But outside of that, I would reevaluate my product development process and say, why did we miss this? And get it all the way to shipping. And have this problem on our hands. I think there's a root cause to it that's probably somewhere in your product development. Likely you're not doing enough user research, customer development, interviews, whatever it is, on the features to really determine whether they're the right features to add. So that would be my advice. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, go to market. That's the bane of my existence as a marketer. So if you've done working backwards, you've done customer interviews, and you've put it out there without releasing it publicly and like had customers start using it, all the artifacts, if you want to call it that, of product development turn into product marketing. So the words you use, the tests you run on ads like this gentleman was doing, and stuff like that actually flips over to turning into the go-to-market. So what we've done in some of my businesses is, as we're building all that, we're documenting all of our product development and making sure that there are update meetings or whatever. The people that are going to do the go-to-market understand it along the way. So the best trick is have a parallel effort. But the best tactic, I would say, is make sure there's artifacts in your product development that are going to lead specifically to the go-to-market. In my opinion, the product manager is also responsible for the go-to-market. That's just my opinion, though. That could be controversial, but that's what I've seen work. Okay, one more question. Make it good. I'm not going to pick, so somebody just speak. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Sorry, I can't hear you. Here, I can get you this. Does this even work? No, I don't know. Anyways, go ahead. What's your question?
The next stage of optimization, what do you think about things like machine learning?
Cool. So the question was, for the next stage of optimization, what do I think about machine learning? All right. Can I rant for a minute? Is that okay? All right. I think all the software we build is pretty dumb. And I think machine learning is one way to make software smarter. I'm probably more interested in looking into things like bandit algorithm, which is a way to do A/B testing and never have to turn off a test ever. So those are the kinds of things I'm thinking about. Machine learning, I think, is in the experiments I've seen, can work really, really, really well. I'm not sure if I would use it for A/B testing just yet, but I'd probably just use it to build smarter software. So what I mean by smarter software would be, why doesn't an analytics tool today analyze your users and tell you what each user needs to do next, and then help you turn that into product marketing or emails? That's machine learning powered. And I've experimented a lot with that, but I wouldn't say machine learning and A/B testing are quite where I think they're at. And the reason is you need such a huge data set in general. This is generally speaking for machine learning to be significant. So I'm more interested in bandit testing, which you could argue is kind of machine learning, very basic. So yeah, I guess that's what I think. I think all our software is dumb and all those things are going to make our software smarter. So I think all the next generation software, including A/B testing, is just going to be smarter. The smarter software is kind of what I would say is the world we're headed in. Sweet. Thank you.